Be seated. I said to the first service, that song, it's just, wow. Whenever you sing truth, there's just something reinforcing about that, right? Just bolsters you up. I heard a professor one time say that truth brings rest to the soul. It also brings strength to the soul. And I think that's why even just having an opportunity to sing here in a corporate setting and worshiping is so empowering and because truth is being spoken to our hearts in times in which we're anxious and we're worried and the world is uncertain, right? Hey, speaking of I think I said school in there somewhere, but I'm sure I did. Good transition, right? One of the things I remembered a lot about my seminary days was the questions that professors asked. One in particular, I remember a class I took, Theology 4. It was the theology of the church and end times. Lots of information. It was a wonderful class. I learned so much there, but it wasn't so much that I learned the most from the material. The things I learned the most in that class was from the questions of the professor. There's oftentimes, as we're going through a subject matter, in those areas there's a lot of debate and a lot of discussion that goes on in terms of, well, will it be this way or will it be that way in terms of the end times, and so people have their opinions. And oftentimes students who were 60 years younger, 70 years younger than the professor. I mean, this guy was tried and true, and he was standing up there, and they would ask him a question sort of really kind of, I don't know, abrasive or even challenging, and he would, more times than not, just ask a question back. And I thought this guy's really good at the Socratic method because his question, I found about a third of the way through the class, those questions that he asked were the questions I needed to be asking. I thought, man, this guy asks all the right questions. Because here's the thing I've learned about scholarship and skill. The skillful people, the knowledgeable people, the wise people are the people who know how to ask the right questions. You can ask all kinds of questions and end up in the wrong spot because you're asking the wrong questions. See, it's important that you and I not only know what questions to ask, but know which are the right ones to ask for situations to gain the wisdom, because questions send you on a journey. Questions send you on a quest. And until your heart finds an answer to that question, you're kind of unsettled. And so asking, though, the right questions will send you on the right kind of journey. This is really, really important for all of life, but specifically when it comes to our walk with the Lord. As we are journeying through life and we're walking with Him, there's questions out there galore, but we've got to be careful to ask the right questions. Now, in relation to this series we're talking about, as we're talking about God's plan for you and I with respect to our money, we're calling it Be Rich, and what does that look like? It's important that you and I ask the right questions as well for this. Because a lot of the world is going to tell you, here's the two questions you should be asking with respect to your money. One is, why don't I have more? And two, how do I get more? Those are basically the two fundamental questions that the world operates by, and so their view of money is sort of limited and really controlled by those two questions. You know, but these two questions, in some ways, are the reason that perhaps many of you in here finding yourself with your lifestyle and your finances butting up against each other. Because you're asking the wrong questions. Because what happens in our lives is that we see something we want, this is the want needs kind of basis, we see something we want, and so we go after it, and we get it, but then we got to maintain that because we have to now make more money, right? And then we live with that for long enough, and it moves up our emotional need equilibrium to where we can no longer see ourselves living without that. So, for instance, let's give some examples. You have a house a certain size, and you think to yourself, man, it would be really nice to have a larger house. I really want a larger house. This couple over here has the same number of kids and has a larger house. How great would that be? So, you kind of stretch yourself and you buy a bigger house, but now you've got to afford that monthly payment, which means you've got to earn more income to support that, right? Or if you have a car issue. You have a certain car that's running. I told you about my red Nissan pickup. It was a wonderful car. I exchanged that, probably to my detriment, for another car. But you want a car, and so you buy it with maybe a loan because you can't afford it, and then you have to maintain those payments. You have the need to increase your income, right? Or you want that new remodel on the house, that new kitchen, or that new bathroom, or that new playroom, you name the scenario. And so you go out and you get finance to make that happen because you want it. Now you need to have the money to keep that thing going. Now, here's the problem. All of a sudden, when you get into that new environment and you have this money that you've got to elevate up, that new environment has set you a new calibrated equilibrium of where your needs base are at. Because now, instead of saying, it'd be nice to have that, now you're saying, I can't imagine life without this. And now you have a need to maintain that. And is it any wonder that we are filled with worry, right, in our lives and stress and saying, now I need to make more money. How do I get more and why don't I have more? You see the cycle that's going on here? This is the cycle that many people find themselves in because they're asking the wrong questions. Instead, the passage we'll look at today is going to invite us really to asking a different question. And here it is, which I think us just even putting it to the top of our budget sheet before we do it will revolutionize so much of what we do. Here's the question. Not so much why don't I have more, but why do I have an abundance? Why do I have an abundance? Why do I have this much? I mean, I'm going to venture to say that regardless of where you're at in life, there's an abundance that you have, whether it be small or large. The fact that you live in California implies that you generally have an abundance in there. And the question really is to start off, whenever you make any amount of money, is, why do I have an abundance? Why do I have this? If you start with that, all of a sudden, the question directs you to a more clear answer. Because now you're asking the question, why have I been given this? What's going on? And how do I manage this well? The passage we're looking at today in Luke chapter 12, you can turn there now if you like, is where Jesus is really being confronted by an individual on a topic, and he uses that opportunity to address the congregation there, the crowd, about the greed that lives in their hearts. And the greed asks two questions. Greed will ask the question of why don't I have more and how can I get more? He wants to redirect them into asking the question of why do I have so much? And in so doing, not only does he solve all financial problems, but he deals with the idolatry of their hearts. So, with that in mind, make sure you're at Luke chapter 12. The setting for this is that Jesus is standing before a large crowd. If you look at verse 1, it says thousands of people, and they're literally trampling each other. I mean, there's a lot of people. He is a pretty popular guy. People want to hear what he has to say, and in between little mini sermons, someone bursts out a question. Verse 13 shows us the question. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." More a command than a question, but nonetheless the point is made. Now this guy, the scenario here in the first century, obviously like today, his parents had died. He and his brother, we'll say there's two of them, maybe there's more, but in that culture, the oldest brother, just by birth, received the rights to managing the estate, and by Deuteronomic law, a double portion of the estate. So whatever his siblings got, he or she would get double. You might want to jot down Deuteronomy chapter 21. Where am I at on this? 21:15 to 17. Because there it talks about the responsibility of the older and the double portion attached to it. And it wasn't uncommon when there's a dispute amongst anyone, whether it be siblings or friends in that culture, because it was really in Israel a law base, the Old Testament law, the Torah, they would oftentimes go to a rabbi and ask the rabbi, hey, settle this dispute for us. What does God say and how should we go about it? So this man in the crowd says, Jesus, tell my brother, maybe he was there in the crowd and he wanted to kind of call him on the spot, tell my brother here to divide the inheritance with me. And that's the setting. And Jesus doesn't really answer him the way he was hoping to get. He says, but he said to him, man, who made me judge or arbitrator over you? Why are you bringing me into this? Well, Jesus, because you're a rabbi. And that's what we do in this culture. We bring rabbis into our disputes, and you tell us what to do. And Jesus says, I have no intention to do that. Why? Now, addressing the crowd, he makes an example out of this. Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness. 10th commandment, right? You know, in the 10 commandments, right? The last one, do not covet your neighbor's anything. Another word therefore is greed. Be on the guard against all kinds of greed, because there's a lot of kinds out there, and you're only seeing one kind, and you're missing the other. For one's life does not consist in the abundance of one's possessions. Now, at first glance, if you're in the crowd, you might be thinking, Jesus, why in the world did you change the topic? I mean, he is coming to you and asking you for fairness, for justice. I mean, he's the one who is being a little bit slighted here. The law says that he should receive at least a portion of the inheritance, and his brother, who's been given the right to manage it, is keeping it from him. Right? That's the scenario. And Jesus warns them about all kinds of greed and covetousness. Here's what's going on in the situation. Jesus is saying to this guy and to the crowd, there are two people who are operating out of greed. The brother and this individual asking the question. And I don't want to get involved between two greedy people fighting it out. That's what's going on here. Well, how is the greed going on in both of these? Well, it's obvious in terms of the older brother. He's holding back from his younger brother the things that he should be given over to him, right? And that's because he sees for himself that this money, I can build that house, I can get that car, I can get that room addition, I can go on that vacation. It's profitable and enjoyable for me to hold on to this money. And I'd prefer not giving it to my brother. Well, the brother is seeing the same thing. If I just got some of that money, I could buy that house, I can go on that trip, I could do these things, right? I mean, the same conversation in relation to that portion is going on in his mind. And Jesus is saying, basically, be careful because there's one kind of greed that is easy to spot, another kind that is not. And this is how it goes. You can always recognize greed when you look out the window, but it's really hard to see greed looking in the mirror. You can always see it. It's easy to find it out here. That person's being greedy. That person is holding on too much. We have our prototypical poster child greedy people in our culture. And if I'm not like them, then I don't see greed in my life. Or if I am up against you and you're withholding something from me, you've got a problem with greed, and I'm the one who's simply the victim. And Jesus is saying there's two kinds of greed. You've got to be aware of all of them. The kind you see out the window, but don't forget the kind you'll see in the mirror. That one is especially hard. When's the last time you've talked to somebody and they've said, man, I'm just a greedy person? Usually they'll say things like, I'm just a good saver. I'm a savvy person, right? They won't ever say the word greed because we don't see it in ourselves so much. And Jesus is warning him. Now, let me take a quick sidebar here because I want to address a little bit of a issue. There's two parties going on, both operating by greed, and the money kind of is in the middle. This is what's a little sidebar for you. If you find yourself as the one who is with prosperity and power, as the older brother is here, he has the power and he has the money, right? And there will be times in your life when you're going to find yourself with the power and the money, whatever degree that may be. You're the one controlling the estate. You're the one controlling the situation. You've got it. You're the upper class. You're the social stratosphere up here, right? The Bible always, always, always calls and commands you and I in that situation to operate with generosity. Always. That's the command. That is the correction for greed, generosity. But there will be other times you'll find yourself in the weak and wanting spots. You'll find yourself as the younger brother here, in which you find that somebody else has something that perhaps you have a rightful claim to by law, but you are getting frustrated at and angry at and demanding it for. And whenever you find yourself in the weak or the wanting spot at the hands of the prosperous and powerful person, your call in the scriptures is always contentment. It's always contentment. Lord, in this place of life, what you have given to me now, I'm content. On one side, they think about generosity. The other side, you think about contentment. You will find yourself at both of those places at some points in your life. And when you do, determine which of those responses is appropriate. It would be wrong for the person with a lot of stuff up here, the powerful and prosperous one, to say, well, I'm going to be content with this, right? And you should be too. No, his response should be, gosh, I want to be generous with this. Flip that around. When you're in the weak and wanting spot, your response is, right, contentment. That's how the Bible lays it out. I'll go into that more as weeks to come. I just wanted to say it because it came up in our text here. But both these guys are operating from a perspective of greed. And this is why. Because Jesus says in the last statement, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of one's possessions. He's calling this younger brother out. And in some ways, even the older brother. Greed is when you look to your future prosperity and hope and dreams and all those things, and the money that's attached to that to get you there, and saying, if I don't have that money, I don't have the abundant life. If I don't have the abundance of money, I can't go on that trip. My future and my joy and my life is attached to me having that extra. You know you're being controlled by greed if you start to envision the quality of your life and your life being attached to the fact that whether or not you have money or possessions or whatnot. Now you can say, I see some greed in there. Jesus wants this man to see that. He's trying to show him what's going on. Be careful, because you can always see greed at the window, but pay attention to your own heart. Now, my wife helped me with this the other day, because I was thinking about this message a little bit, and I said, hon, tell me, what do you think about, what is greed? And she said, greed is not sharing. I thought, that's true. And then she offered some information for me. She was like last night, when we made our peanut butter malts. We like to make these little, that's peanut butter and ice cream and milk. I'll give you the recipe later. But make these peanut butter malts, and they're really good and yummy. And so I made an overabundance amount, because I really enjoy this stuff. And I gave us both a nice large cup. And then we had some left over. So I drank mine and went back and got some more. And I enjoyed the rest, right? That was all mine. I just assumed that she wouldn't want any more, but that was also me in some ways assuming that I didn't want to give her any more because I want to enjoy it. So he says, like last night with the peanut butter malts, you didn't ask me if I wanted any more. Now I could have deflected and said, well, but it was greed. I mean, I just didn't, I wanted the rest, right? I just did. That's just the honesty of it all. Babe, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. See, it's easy to see at the window, but it's hard to see in the mirror. And Jesus is helping this man identify all kinds of greed that goes on. And then he tells this story. Tells a story to the crowd, because he wants the audience to recognize the scope that this thing called greed has. Because it's a deadly thing. You remember the command or the call that greed is the root of all kinds of evil, right? It's a problem, and we got to be aware of it. So he says this little story. He says, and he told them a parable saying, the land of a rich man produced plentifully. Now, one thing that's helpful with this land picture is that there's an awareness of the dependence upon God in the process. You can go out there and you can till your field, you can plant your seeds, cover them up, all on the perfect day. You can make sure that soil is well fertilized, and you could do it at the right time, and you could still not get a good product. I mean, your tree can be a bountiful tree, or it could be a small tree. This man, his land, happened to produce a lot of food, a lot of goods. And it sounds like it's almost more so than perhaps other people in the same area. I mean, in that day and age, kind of wealth was built up into the land, and so there would be like little acres and plots and so forth. So the people next to him, it sounds like in some ways that his gave out more than theirs. They both did the job, they both went to work, they both did it on time and give all that they had, but they got different returns. He happened to get, let's say, 4 bushels of olives, and they only got 2. Why? It just happened that way. The land just produced that way. He can control his hard work, but he couldn't control the produce. That's something that he has no control over. And yet it says, and he thought to himself, what shall I do? Wow, I have an abundance. I have extra. What do I do with that? Well, I have nowhere to store my crops. You start to see a little danger, a little pitfall attaching itself to the fact that he now finds himself with extra. And that pitfall is this. Jot it down in your notes. Pitfall number 1. He's assuming, and we assume, that you're the source of your abundance. He's starting to assume ownership. He's starting to assume that he's the one, because of his hard work and his labor, that constitutes the fact that he gained more. That maybe I just did it better than somebody else. Maybe I did it more than somebody else, and I worked at the right time than somebody else. You do realize hard work is important, and God doesn't bless the lazy person, right? That's just... Proverbs hits on that all up and down. The sluggard, God doesn't bless. The person works hard, right? But just because you worked hard doesn't mean there's a guarantee for a bountiful harvest. A lot of you in here have put your time in, have put your labor in. you've been diligent, you've been to school, you did your work, you did it in the right time, the right format, you were working through the process, and you find yourself, you start a business that's similar to somebody else's, it's just not going that well. Somebody else's seems to be booming, and you are kind of struggling, right? And it would be false for that person who has it booming saying, well, let me give you the pointers. This is my checklist of things I did. Oh, I did all those things. Well, then you must just be broken. You must have a flaw. Guys, the problem here is he's taken ownership for his abundance. And the reality is we have to always remember, no matter how much we have, that is always a source from God. God's the one who gives. And he gives in different amounts. He doesn't promise everyone the same amount. Some people's land will give 2 bushels. Some people's land will give 4 bushels. They'll both work equally hard. The question is, what do you do when you have the abundance, right? The first thing we have to do is recognize that I wasn't necessarily the source of that. Yes, I worked hard, but I can't control the rain. I can't control how many apples came on my apple tree as opposed to somebody else. Lord, you're the one who gave me that abundance. Turn over to Deuteronomy chapter 8. Just for one quick text to kind of show you God's initial command to his people as they got ready to enter in from a time of want into a time of abundance. For 40 years, they were literally walking around the desert. God's providing for them bountifully, but it was kind of bland. Manna, right? Quail for 40 years. Not a very robust menu. They would have one pair of sandals that never wore out, but they never got a change of color. They had few garments. They were really in a place in which there was no variety, right? And they're getting a bit tired of this, and I think I would too of the same thing year in and year out. They're about to go into a land where they're going to have lots and lots of abundance. They're going to have all different kinds of fruit trees, all different kinds of vegetables. Their flocks are going to produce, and they're going to enjoy water and scenery and atmosphere and all the different things they've wanted. Stability in a house. He says in Deuteronomy chapter 8, as they go in there, you've got to be careful because you're going to enter into a real danger. Not maybe for you right away, but for the generations that come, because they're going to forget about my care. Verse 17 of chapter 8. Beware lest you say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand have gotten me this wealth. You shall remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you, key phrase, power to get wealth. He's the one who gave you the power to go out there and plant the seeds. I mean, you're just giving him credit for the rain. Let's go a little further. I know people who, for no error of their own, find themselves with major health challenges. You've heard stories of people who were driving and got in a car accident and lost limbs and lost faculties, right? Talk about a hit to ability to acquiring and amassing wealth. And it depletes their income, it depletes their reserves they had stored up for themselves, and now they find themselves in a precarious situation. Hey, don't ever think that you are where you're at because you are the source of what you are. Remember that I'm the one who gives you even the power to go to work, the ability to show up there, to hit your alarm clock, and to get out the door. You may not feel it as much as the farmer because he knows that rain, and you're a bit removed from that, but just don't forget, even though you think Apple is the producer of your check, I got your back in terms of your energy getting there. Oh, and by the way, this economy is pretty sketchy right now. I can take it out in a minute. I am the source of all that you have, your needs and your abundance. Never forget that, because once you do, you go from stewardship mode into ownership mode. And the scriptures always say, don't forget you're simply stewards of God's stuff. You are not the owners of it. You're not entitled to it. It's an important piece, because unless we do, we will again ask those questions. Why don't I have more? How do I get more? When we realize God's the source, we start to ask, why have I gotten so much? Why have you given me this much? Wow. Kind of changes the language around a little bit. Go back to Luke chapter 12. Luke chapter 12. There we go. So this man has a little quandary. What shall I do, for I have nowhere to store my crops? And then he thought, and this is probably a good thought for a lot of us. He said, I'll do this. I'll tear down my barns and I'll build larger ones. And there I will store all of my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, or myself, my person, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry. But God said to him, fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you prepared, whose will they be? Now, let me just pause here, because this guy, let's just be honest, isn't a fool, right? He's our model. I mean, he got more, and he didn't go off and spend it. He didn't go off and, buy bigger things. He built a barn to store it. He put into his 401k. He put into all of the saving. He was a saver. I mean, this guy is our model. Parents, you know this. You're trying to teach your kid how to save for the future, because that's always the challenge, right? This is a guy you'd want to bring in to teach your kids that. He's the model. This makes this point really quickly. This guy's problem is not that he's rich. Wealth is not the issue here, okay? There is no more glory for the wealthy as there is for the impoverished, and vice versa. God is not holding over his head the fact that he had an abundance of income, abundance of crops. The problem is he didn't know why he had an abundance. He didn't know why he had an abundance. And so he thought, well, this must be mine. This must have come from my own kind of effort and work. So what am I going to do? How do I get more? How do I enjoy life? I'm going to build bigger barns. I'll have cars. I'll put them in there, and I'll build a bigger house. Hopefully you're seeing a bit of yourself in this, because this is just the human condition, the human heart. This is how we all kind of tend to think, right? I remember thinking, I've oftentimes said to myself, and if I won the lottery, what would I do? I really doubt that. I really doubt I would do what I say I would do. Isn't it funny whenever you actually acquire the stuff that you tell God if you only had more that you